Okay, so as Tufi was mentioning, WhoKnows started as a AI-assisted expertise discovery engine to promote collaboration inside of corporations. So what that means, you can imagine a corporation has a whole bunch of user profiles for their various employees. They might have skills and expertise listed on those profiles, but only 10% actually have anything on their profile. Most people don't fill them out. I'm sure a lot of you don't fill out yours if you were at a large company. So what we started was a engine to be able to help discover the expertise of employees at a company and give them very little restriction to allow them to add those to their profile. So to really allow them to very easily add expertise to their profile, but not only that, but also make that expertise very granular in scale. So instead of adding to your profile that you know programming or JavaScript, you would have very specific topics inside of JavaScript. Maybe you know a particular version of AngularJS, which most people would not add that to their profile if they were talking about a skill, because it's too low level and there's no way you would add everything you know. So our solution was geared around that, and also to make it searchable so that when someone needed to know a very specific topic, they can go directly to the person that knows that. And as Tufi was saying, we're kind of expanding that to more of an HR product and more of a global scale as opposed to just corporations as well. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about today is how blockchain gets into this and how Toda gets into this. But first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about what identity means, and there was a little bit of discussion from the Ubase guys about this in the previous talk. But we often think of identity as kind of hard things that we see on an ID card. We think of things like name, age, weight, height, that sort of thing. But also we have softer things that change over time. So we have things like the people you know, your friends. We have your skills and knowledge, and your own history of events that happened to you. So just as Tufi was mentioning about, I think, a DNA analogy, sure, if you imagine yourself as a combination of nature and nurture, the nature part is definitely, you can think of that as your DNA, but then your experiences become more of the nurture part of things. And we kind of have a description of that in terms of our own sense of DNA, but for experience. So when I'm thinking of identity, I'm usually thinking more of the nurture side of things. But for identity, we have some technology that exists today, such as ID cards, username, password, user profiles. And we have some management that we do for those type of things, like password managers for dealing with all the passwords that we have. We have identity theft protection for dealing with anything like that. But for some of the softer things, we have things like reputation of whether or not you trust this person knows Java, or if you need someone to fill out a profile, then you just ask them. You send them an email and ask whether or not they know something, or whether or not they can update their profile. So the type of solution we're looking at and what a solution needs, the very first thing is that we don't want central failure points. So this is where the decentralized aspect comes in, and specifically not something like a identity database. At the very start, I'm thinking of something like an Equifax leak that happened last year, and that's definitely an example of something you want to avoid. What we also need is endorsements slash attestations from various different sources and actors in the system. So people who can verify information, not necessarily a central source, but various sources that we can build up evidence over time with. What we also need is privacy of endorsements, so being able to choose a particular identity for an endorsement. So you can imagine that if someone is, say, a whistleblower in an organization, they may not want to reveal their actual identity, the full identities of someone, but they may want to reveal some aspect of that identity to give them credibility. So identity is not a whole binary thing. It can be subdivided into very small granular bits that have evidence attached to it. And likewise, if we want to reveal something, we also want to reveal only the information that's needed at a particular time. While we may have a lot of endorsements to say we have a lot of different skills in various areas, we may not want to reveal every single skill that we have. So for instance, someone at a company, maybe they're working on a secret project for that company, and people have given them endorsements for blockchain technology, but they don't want to reveal that because they're part of a public company, and they don't want people to know that they've been working on blockchain before it's been released. So that sort of information. And as a another example of the requirement for this privacy aspect is, when you want to get into a bar, you need to reveal that you're over the age of 21 or over. But to do that, you have to show your identity card, which reveals a lot more information about yourself. Not only does it reveal your actual age, it also reveals potentially your citizenship. It reveals height, weight, gender, a whole bunch of different things that you don't need for the actual question. The question is whether or not you're over 21. So for our solution, what we're working on, we have 3 parts: second, third, and first-party endorsements or attestations. So the first part, as I mentioned before, we need to break up these endorsements. So instead of verifying your age, to have your age in your profile, we need a way to say, okay, this person is over a given age. And the second part is to be able to anonymize that. As I said, maybe a blockchain expert wants to endorse your knowledge of blockchain, but may not reveal that they themselves have been working in blockchain or vice versa. So let's go to second and third party. So these are roughly the same idea. So in the second party case, it's kind of the base case of what you can imagine of what an endorsement would look like. One person is saying that someone else knows some information or has some knowledge, has some skills, has some connection, any type of information like that. Now, at this time, the person who is giving that endorsement has their own set of credentials to show exactly what their identity that they're attaching to this endorsement. So they may not have to attach their entire identity, they may only want to attach a subset of that. And once you receive that endorsement, you may not, if you receive that endorsement and you then want to prove to someone that you know something, well, the person you're proving it to looks at that information, sees your endorsements, and then at that point they get to choose whether or not this endorsement makes sense. So it's not it doesn't have to be necessarily trusted by everyone, but if you have only one random person saying that blockchain versus there's 100 people who say blockchain, those may mean different things to different people. Now in the third party case, pretty much the same thing as second party, but it may be a bigger organization involved, or it could be in some cases actual source code giving this endorsement. Generally, organizations are to be avoided. Same example as with Equifax before about that leak. The bigger the organization is, the more risks that could be involved in that sort of thing if you put too much trust in them. But if you have something like code, you can imagine something like a hackathon happening where a bunch of people enter a hackathon, they submit their projects, and then there's some kind of community grading on that project, or on those projects, in which case you can put that into actual code to actually be an endorsement in that case and become evidence. Now, in our case, we can offer something even more than that, and that's in the case of first party. So this is a self-attestation, but with record keeping. So one immediate example of this is using your browsing history to establish knowledge over time. So you would be theoretically able to say a statement like, I've been involved with blockchain since 2010, which would be a pretty strong endorsement. But you wouldn't necessarily need other people to endorse that for you. So in this case, because it's browsing history, you would only like to reveal the browsing history that proves your case. You don't want to reveal all your browsing history. And because it's a self-signed endorsement, you need some way to prevent people from just abusing the system. So in this case, we can have a limit on the total history that you can submit. So you could theoretically say that you visited every single website in the world every day and get a lot of theoretical knowledge from that. But the total number of websites that you visited would be shown, so people would very quickly see that your profile is completely bogus. And this can be added, or can use the engine that we built over time, which can help with this to measure involvement with content. So whether or not someone was actually reading a page is something our AI system can do. We can extract and aggregate topics from content. So when coming up with a list of URLs that show your expertise in a topic with blockchain, we can come up with that list, so we don't need you to manually go through and figure out all those URLs, and we can get relationships to with other people as well. Okay, so I'm almost done the talk here, but I figured that I should talk a little bit about some of the technical aspects of how this works. So for instance, if you want to be able to break up information so you don't have to reveal everything, you can imagine having a simple hash tree where, say you have some kind of connection like an email address, so you have Toda.Network.com. You can break that up into the first part and the second part, add it to a hash tree, and then only reveal that this email address that you have credentials for has a .Toda.Network address to it. So then you can say, well, someone from Toda.Network is giving you this credential or this proof of your expertise. Or if someone wanted to be a whistleblower, exactly a similar situation. For something like greater than or less than proofs, for instance, greater than 21 years old or less than 21 years old, you can do something similar with hash chains, where if you want to prove that you're over 21 at a time of proof, you have, at some point someone says you are over 21 at this point, then you can have hashes leading up into a chain that if you want to say, okay, I'm greater than 21, okay, I have that proof, but if I want to say I'm greater than 25, I can also give that proof as well by giving a few hashes before the final hash in that hash chain. So I can have proofs of that. And also that works for less than proofs, though it's kind of an inverted situation, but you can do a similar thing. And if you have a hash tree for your browsing history, each individual URL can become a hash added to a tree, but you can put a restriction on that tree that not only is a hash at each node, but the number of nodes beneath that node is also attached to a given node. So as it goes up to the eventual root at the top, you have the total number of nodes in the actual hash tree added to it. So you can get a total number of browsing history and leave that to be public. And then finally, with the WhoKnows engine, we have some different technology that we can add to it. One thing that Tufi was big on is the human-based genetic algorithm, which very quickly I can say, if an expert says you're an expert, that means something more than just anyone saying you're an expert. And that algorithm quantifies that. And then in addition to that, lots of NLP, natural language processing, document tagging, semantic graphs. So knowing Bitcoin means that you know a bit about blockchain, which means you know a bit about Satoshi, a whole bunch of different stuff. So these semantic concepts are related. And for machine learning, very sparse matrices approaches. So if you're interested in that, I can talk to you about that. Okay, so and finally, the name, because usually with these projects, usually they take a different name than whatever company was working on them. So we have Rollo, and if you want to know more specifically about Rollo, you can talk to Chris over there or talk to me. And unfortunately, that's my personal email address. If you just put in barry@whoknows.com, you'll get my work address. And yeah, I think that's it.